Sorry. I'm just going to start the recording for you guys, and then you can get started.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Here you are. You're ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me share my sound and let me share my screen. Okay.
Just a minute. Before that, I would like to give out some ground rules for this. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Margaret Nisaraj, and I will be the moderator for this breakout room. Before we begin, I would just like to take a minute to go over some ground rules to ensure all our presenters and guests have a positive and educational experience. We ask that anyone who is not presenting to keep their cameras and mics off during the presentation. This will help eliminate any background noise and distractions. If you have a question or a comment, please type it in the chat and we will go through them at the end of our QA session. Presentations need to stay within their allotted 15 minutes. When the time is up, I will ask the presenter to wrap up their points so that we can move on to the next presentation. This is to ensure that all our colleagues have time to share their research. Lastly, we would like to remind everyone that the session is being recorded. Thank you. And now I will pass on to the first presentation.
Okay, I think, yeah, sorry, is there a question?
No, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can see my PowerPoint. I'm still a little bit new to Teams, so it has been a learning curve over the last few days. I'm so happy to be here today. My name is Virginia Robson. I'm presenting to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's so nice to be in Windsor virtually and talking to people from, all over. Just to give you a brief background about myself, I've been teaching English to speakers of other languages at the university level for over 20 years. So I've taught in China and the United Arab Emirates, and I've been teaching at the University of Pittsburgh in their linguistics department since 2016. I teach mostly writing classes to international graduate and undergraduate students, but I also teach at the English Language Institute's intensive English program, where I'm currently the curriculum supervisor for the higher level writing classes. So I'm going to talk to you today about something, a practice that I've been doing for a while in my writing classes, but it is useful for any class that requires writing, and it really became especially relevant when we switched to the online learning environment and remote teaching. So I'm going to talk to you today about recorded feedback on writing for better understanding by students. So in 15 minutes, I want to give you a brief rationale of the practice, talk about the equipment you need, the steps in the process, a possible script, an activity to follow up with students, and give you some examples. And then I guess there will be questions and answers at the end of the three presentations in this group. So let's get started. So why would you make a recording? Teachers are so busy, right? We spend so much time reading students' papers, writing feedback on them, and putting comments and other suggestions. But the truth is, students don't always read the feedback. And if they read it, they might not understand the written feedback. Again, I work with international students, so English is not their first language. So sometimes, even though I think I'm being perfectly clear, they might not understand my written feedback. And I also started doing this because I really, felt like there was a lack of time to conference with students individually, just because of short class times or, limited office hours. This was one strategy I came up with to deal with this. So what the recording does is it reinforces, it complements the written feedback that you've given, okay? And, when we switched from in-person classes to teaching online, I thought this really helped to build rapport with my students, right? You're making a recording, you're having kind of a direct, albeit one-sided conversation with your students. They hear your voice talking to them about their writing. This was especially relevant when I was teaching asynchronous classes. And this also comes up in the literature. So it is a way to help build rapport. It shows your presence with students. It also shows the students, gives them a way to see your thinking process, how you grade things. Students can make that connection between what you're talking about, what you're pointing out to them in their paper, and the rubric and their grade, right? When you take time to give positive feedback in your recording, you're actually giving them, voiced affirmation to these developing writers, and students overwhelmingly find this kind of feedback useful and helpful to them. So, some practical considerations. Like I say, we are all teachers. We are all very, very busy. Our time is precious. And therefore, you have to decide what works best for you. Myself, I only do this on the first draft of major assignments. I'm not going to do this on a small paragraph or sentence level assignment. So those first drafts that are very weighty. Myself personally, I do not do screencasts, but I know a lot of people do, and that's also another method you could use. And I'm not going to lie, again, it does take time, but once you have your workflow, your comments, and your script set up, it gets faster. I just did a bunch of these yesterday. I'm teaching in the summer semester. We're at midterms. So I did a bunch of these yesterday, and I've done it so much now, it doesn't take that much time at this point. So also, it is often a new thing for students. And once students know the routine of how this process works, it does get easier. I am usually quite strict with the students at first. I will not discuss their papers until they've listened to the feedback and let me know that they've listened to it, which I'll explain how they do that in a few more slides. Okay, so what equipment do you need? Well, for a long time when we were, when I was actually grading physical papers and we were in face-to-face classes, I used my phone, right? I could take my papers anywhere, whip out my phone, do my grades, make the comments. Now, of course, that we're online and everything is submitted online, I use my laptop's voice recorder. Now, a lot of learning management systems such as Canvas have a built-in recorder that you can use. Some of the anti-plagiarism software has built-in recorders. For example, you can see the example with Canvas and with Turnitin. Those limit you to probably about 3 minutes or so, which is probably about as long as you'd want it to be. Myself, I often have issues with my internet connection where I live, so I find it easier to make my recordings offline and then just send them to students by email. There are also, of course, paid programs you can use, things like Screencast Pro or Screencast-O-Matic, and that's up to you. Maybe your university has those programs. Mine doesn't. So let's talk about workflow. What are the steps in the process? It's fairly straightforward. Mark your student's paper like you would any other time. Make notes on what you want to say. Again, because I teach international students, I have a mix of content comments as well as grammar and vocabulary feedback for them to improve their language. I always try to make sure I'm linking the feedback I'm giving to the grading rubric and the requirements for the assignment to make that connection. I pick 1 or 2 positive things to give an example and give examples in the feedback. And then I focus on, a couple of common persistent errors to comment on. So I'm not going to talk about, 1 misplaced comma, but if there are 15 misplaced commas, I might say you need to review the rules for comma usage, right? So those common persistent errors. And when I talk about those errors, I want to give them strategies or suggestions to correct those errors. So give them an example they can use, give them an alternative. And then included with that, there's always a follow-up activity for students to do to confirm that they've listened to and understood the feedback, which I'm going to show you in another slide or 2. Okay, so one of the things I think it's very useful to do is to make a script for yourself. Once you sort of set it up, you just can plug in what applies to that individual student. So my script always starts with a greeting and the name of the assessment. So it all says, it always starts with, hello, Nari, this is the feedback on the first draft of your first research essay, Japanese loanwords in English, okay? And then I go to the positives, things like a strong thesis statement, relevant examples, a good organization for your argument, good academic vocabulary use, something like that. And then I focus on the errors. So, things like what often comes up in my students' writing, word choice, using words that have a different connotation, or maybe they need to develop their examples more or integrate their evidence better, okay? From there, I always want to give them a strategy to correct those errors. So for example, if it's, an error with word form or word choice, I might say something like, oh, we don't use this word in this context. Use, something else instead. Or, you need to add more details to develop your examples better. Something like that. Or in the case of like a grammar error, combine your sentences to have more sentence variety. Finally, I close with any final suggestions and remind them of the follow-up activity. So, if go back, I'll say something like, go back, look at what I've written on your paper, make these changes. And if you make these changes, it'll make your writing stronger, or it'll make your ideas clearer to the reader. And let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so I wanted to play an example. I think I have time for this. And I hope I did set this for to share my sound, but somebody please pipe up if you can't hear it. This is a part of a recording I made yesterday for one of my students. Most of my recordings are between 2 and 4 minutes long. It is not very polished. It's like I say, it's very conversational. In fact, when I was listening to this just before we started, I realized I made a glaring error in, a subject-verb agreement error, but I'm not going to go back and edit it, right? There's lots of ums, ahs, and pauses, and the students don't seem to mind that. In fact, we usually have a good laugh about that. So let me hit play and see if this works. Let me know if it doesn't.
Hi, Nari. This is the feedback on the first draft of your first research essay about Japanese loanwords in English. I think you have a really clear thesis statement. You've got some well-developed paragraphs where you clearly explain how these words came into English. You've given us some relevant examples, and you have a really good use of academic vocab here. So those are all nice aspects, or really good, strong aspects of your essay. Some of the things that I think you can work on is some awkward wording, and you can see where I've marked that. So it might be a question of like word order or word choice. Have a look at what I've marked and read the notes and the suggestions to help you correct those errors. Things like using the passive voice when the active voice might be a little better. But one thing I really want to point out is some of your informal word choices. So for example, in academic writing, we generally try to avoid the use of you or we, so either the first and second person. We try to be a little bit more objective. So for example, when you are talking about if you go to a restaurant, you will find the word entree on the menu, which is a French loan word in English. So I think, get rid of that you. You can make it more general. So, for example, in a restaurant, the word entree is on the menu, which is a French loan word, right?
Okay, so I'm going to stop that there because I don't want to hear my own voice anymore. What I do, as students get that audio file, I send them an email with their grade, a copy of the rubric, and the feedback file. So in the email I send them, I tell them they need to reply to me, and this is the follow-up activity. I want them to respond to what I've said to them. So it helps to ensure that students have listened to and hopefully understood the feedback. It acknowledges their responsibility to improve their work. And the perk for me is it gives them more writing practice. Again, when we were face-to-face, I used to do this on paper. Now they can just hit reply in an email. And it's quite a simple task. I just ask them to listen to the feedback and write a reply that mentions 2 things that I've commented on to improve their writing and how they plan to do it. So as I said, I did some of these yesterday, sent out the emails yesterday, and last night I got this answer from one of my students, one of my better students. And as you can see, it's just a simple little acknowledgement. It's nice to get a thank you from the students. You know, thank you for giving me useful feedback. It mentions the 2 things and how she plans to fix them. Okay. And she called it useful, and that word comes up very often when I've asked students about, do they like this kind of feedback? So I always do an end of term curriculum survey, and this is one of the questions I ask is, what do you think about the feedback you've gotten in this class? And it usually comes back as being either useful or very useful. It's been overwhelmingly positive.
Left. Kindly wrap up your presentation.
Okay. Sure. Students like this. Okay, I'll do it like, I'll say this. They really like it because it shows the teachers reading carefully. They find it useful. In fact, my boss knew I was giving this presentation. She just sent me an article that I haven't had time to read thoroughly, but it brings up the points that I've mentioned, that this kind of feedback gives us an opportunity to elaborate on issues, and that students find it very useful, very helpful. This was another piece from the literature, and that it's important because it's an instance of direct instruction. It relates to teaching presence and social presence, which is so important in online learning. So here are my references. I hope this gives you some ideas about how you might implement something similar in your classes. I feel like it's worth the time and effort when I see the improvements in the students' writing. Contact me at Robson. Thank you very much. Enjoy the conference. Enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Thank you. If you have any Q&A, please put it in the chat and we will go through at the end after all the presentation is over. So now we can move on to the second presentation. But before that, I request the presenters to turn on the live caption options.
Where do we do that?
If you go to the top, just close to the video on button.
Yes.
There will be 3 dots for more actions. Are you able to see that?
I'm going to have to stop sharing. Okay, more actions?
More actions, and then you will be able to see it at the
Turn
bottom.
on live captions, right?
Yeah, right. Yep, right.
Okie dokie. We will do that. So good morning. My name is Jill Urbanik. I'm a professor in mechanical, automotive, and materials engineering here at the University.
Are you presenting your screen?
Yes. You can't see it?
Yeah. I'm able to see it. Yeah, you can.
Okay. Thank you. I am a professor of mechanical and automotive and materials engineering here at the University of Windsor. I have been in Pittsburgh for conferences in the wintertime. It was absolutely beautiful. And football season was rampant and a lot of fans out in the streets. But anyway, a completely different topic, but I think a similarity in an approach when it comes to immediate feedback and trying to understand and helping our international students be successful. I'm going to be discussing about how I established a course framework for computer-aided machining experiential knowledge and skills development. And we have a professional program here at the University of Windsor, and we have students that are literally from all over the world. They have different backgrounds, different language, different culture, and they want to develop professional skills and get a job. And so it's both dealing with the technical element as well as the communication element that is so important, and being able to show competency to potential employers, because we do have employers that actually will ask people during an interview process to actually demonstrate some of the skills and what they have learned, especially when it comes to highly technical specific aspects. So a little introduction to advanced manufacturing in the course. And then I did a bit of a review on how we learn because I wanted to have that influence the course structure. And I'll talk a little bit about the results of the course and summary and conclusion. So up here, there's a simulation. We went from a block to a final shape. We have a little bit of red in here. That's a crash. That means we've got to do something about it. And so the whole idea was to give the students the experience, the knowledge, and the ability to use high-end software, but also make good design decisions. So course designs need to include engineering, science, and engineering design, but we also have to strengthen practical skills. How can you communicate a design solution? How can you show the goodness of your work? How can you express some of the things gone right and things gone wrong that you have done in some of your course experiences because you want to strengthen your employment opportunities. So I want to share with you a structured framework that ensures that the students, they undergo deep learning throughout the course, but also constant practice, along with meaningful feedback. And one of the things that I have as a challenge is that I have different class sizes. I know we all deal with this, but unknown skill levels, because we have students, mainly international students, and we have students from all over the world that not only have unknown skill levels with respect to English and language competency, but also technical skills. They all have different backgrounds. So I want to make sure that I understand and can address some of these issues at the beginning of the term, but everybody is at a high level at the end of the term. And one of the things that I want to do is challenge them as individuals, but also foster a collaborative learning approach. And so one of the things that I've done are set up a series of mini projects that have parameters. So everybody gets the same project, but everybody has a slightly different flavor. So I start with vanilla ice cream, but then put in a little bit of spice or a little bit of chocolate or a little bit of fruit. So essentially the base is the same, but the flavors are slightly different. And so what I want to do is to make sure that they have the basic knowledge. I have set things up so that we're dealing with Autodesk or AutoCAD software, and that they get certificates that show different levels of competency. But it's easy to manipulate the tests for the certificates because you can take them over and over. But the mini projects enable you to be able to develop your competency, and they can develop some technical and social skills, because every time the student finishes a project, they have to do a demonstration to show what they've learned, what the tips and tricks that they have, and they get immediate feedback. So there's an explosion of knowledge that's going on right now. I know in the engineering environment, we've got new design tools and new design challenges. We're looking at multidisciplinary characteristics. We were talking about circular ways of thinking, and looking at global environments and looking at the consequences of our decision making from so many different perspectives. And so we have to stay on top of it, but we also have to be able to manage it. And one of the things that I find fascinating is how we learn. And there was some work that was done from Rasmussen, and it was about errors. And if you're working in a nuclear power plant, you don't want to make a mistake. I mean, the consequences of a problem can be really, really significant. And so he was doing some analysis on errors and why people make mistakes and how people make mistakes. And so he was looking at how we learn. And when we're in a new situation, like when we're learning for the first time new course material, we don't have a baseline. So we're very conscious of what we're doing, and we're in the process of changing our background information into a set of rules. And then once we establish competency, once we can associate, hey, the light is green, I can go through, I'm in a standard car, I can downshift or I can upshift, that we develop the rules, and then we go to a skills where it's absolutely automatic. Now, some people can go from conscious to skills, and we have to understand and appreciate that there's different ways that we learn and move from the conscious, the associative, and automatic levels, or skills, rules, and knowledge. And so with the knowledge, new software, we have a new interface, we have different parameters. You know, it's pretty easy to make mistakes. I showed you that little simulation at the beginning. We saw the red. The red means that there was a crash situation. We need to be able to understand it, interpret it, and deal with it. When we learn the interface and we understand, oh, this is a problem and this is how I fix it, then we're going from knowledge to rules, and we can develop design solutions. So the whole idea of having a series of mini projects is to develop the rule base, but it's collaborative. I want peer-to-peer interaction. I want people to ask, hey, how did you do this? How did you do that? Will that work for me? Because that helps reinforce the learning. And by the time we get to the major projects, a skill set has been developed. So it's almost autonomous. You don't even have to think. You can just go from A to B to C and get the results. And another thing that I found really interesting is how people solve a problem depends on their background. So if you've already got knowledge, you can bypass all of this information. Or we observe, we identify, we interpret, we evaluate. Everybody goes from the beginning to the end in a different way. And understanding that, understanding these two things, along with how we learn, it takes a long time the first time to do something, a little bit less time the second, a little bit less time the third. I tried to establish a framework that could give students immediate and meaningful feedback. I really liked the first presentation because that's exactly what the focus was immediate and meaningful. And so I thought it was quite clever, and I want to find out more. So what I've done in this advanced manufacturing class was set up a series of modules where we establish a baseline, and then we get into some online training, which is basic, with a series of mini projects. But by the time you're done, modules 1 and 2, when I do have some sort of assessment, the students are already at a really good space. They have the foundational knowledge. And then we get into another little mini project and then a major project. And the end results are fantastic. And so this is the structure of the course, and it's a little busy, but I introduce all of the course and assignment and all that information at the beginning, and a couple of assignments just to make sure that people have the baseline. But then every week there is an assessment and then feedback. So this is to make sure that they have the prerequisite skills. And so the first 2 weeks are review, and then they get a certificate. And like I said, this is an Autodesk certificate. And so this is outside of the university environment, and then a mini project, and then another certificate, and then another mini project. And so by the time they have a midterm, they've already got a baseline. We've established it. They've done lots of practice, and usually the students do really well. And then some more intense, more in-depth work. But by the time they're done, the projects are very good quality. Now, one of the things, I can have small class sizes, I can have extremely large class sizes. So when someone does their mini project, they do a demonstration. They have 2 minutes and they have to demonstrate how they solved the problem. So the idea is that I used this particular process to solve this particular problem, and this is how I verified it. And the verification is like that simulation I showed you right at the beginning of the introductory slide. And they demonstrate what they want to show off. And then it's easy to determine whether someone has put the effort into the assignment or someone has just, maybe they got their friends to help them a little bit and they really didn't do as much as they should have. But doing the demonstration gets them used to explaining what they did and why. They get immediate feedback, and so by the time the midterm occurs, they've already had assessment on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements, and they've established a really good baseline. And so this is a sample of a mini project. where we have dimensions A, B, C. So here's dimension A, and here's dimension F, here's dimension B. So one person could have 100 millimeters. Another person could have 125 millimeters. And so we have a tremendous amount of, we have a tremendous amount of variability here. And so each student will have a unique problem. And the challenge is, if I have a block of steel or a block of aluminum, I will provide them the material. And that's also another variant, but I don't want to go too much into that. But we start from a block. How do we get to this finished shape? How do we hold the part? And how do we select the appropriate cutting tools and the specific process information to get us from an initial state to a final state? That may take a couple of hours for someone that has already really good baseline knowledge. That may take 10 hours for somebody who does not. But the bottom line is they have the time to do the work and they have the ability to demonstrate their work. And this is the important part, getting used to showing off what they can do and manipulating the interface. So this is the marking trend over the last couple of years. Oh, a little lower. And that's one of the things that sometimes people don't put the effort in. But once they understand the standard, if they cannot answer the questions that are being asked, again, like Virginia, it's important to have a script. So these are the questions that are being asked, and they're not always the same questions for each student, but each student has a set period of time in order to demonstrate their work. And the idea is to hit the high notes and show off, but also show competency. And once the standard for the class is set, we see that they really do a great job. And then here are some examples of a physical project. And again, the nature of the physical project will depend on the class size, but this is a frabjou. And I love mathematical art. I just think that some of the pieces that are out there are amazing. And this is a great example of something that is both easy and hard. And so what the students did is that each student had a different size. So the size from tip to tip would vary. So again, the idea is that you can talk to each other when it comes to design and build strategies, but you had to develop your own unique answer. And so you can,
kindly wrap up.
Pardon me?
14 minutes up, there's 1 more minute left.
Yeah, and I've got 2 more slides. So here we have a result. Here, cardboard furniture. And again, going from beginning to layout, to build and test, absolutely beautiful. So to conclude, I've had very positive feedback from the students because they like the constant feedback. They see the opportunities to improve as they progress. They have external certificates, and they enjoy the projects and appreciate how realistic they are. Some personal observations, they learn that they can manipulate the process to get their certificate, but if they don't do the mini project and demo this thing well, then they're not going to get the marks. And they appreciate afterwards when they actually have interviews with companies that they can show some of these things off. They like to perform and typically enjoy the course very, very much. So I am done. And here are my references. And I don't think we have time for questions, but we do have a period afterwards. Thank you.
Guys, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. We'll be addressing it at the end. Now we can move on to the third presentation. If you have not turned on the live captions, please turn it on.
Screen? I shared my screen. Do you have my screen?
Yep. Can you turn on the live captions if you haven't done it earlier?
Yeah, for sure. Turn off live caption. Okay. So do you have my screen? Because I have already shared my screen.
Yeah. Have you turned on the live captions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I activated my.
Yeah, fine. If you have turned on, then you're good to go.
It's okay now? I think so.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this talk. I hope you enjoy this talk today. I'm assistant prof at Polytechnic Montreal. This work in progress is based on my experience in teaching sustainable production courses for undergrad and also graduate course during pandemic. So I'm going to talk today about how to stay current in teaching sustainability topics during the pandemic. So I will start with background, the highlighted points in literature review, and then I will explain the proposed conceptual framework, and I will conclude with some remarks and avenues for future research. So first of all, as you know, we have the emergence of new industrial technologies that require new skills and competence for engineers in the future. We have Generation Z and Alpha in the future. So the traditional teaching, traditional teaching style cannot work properly in this context. We need to adopt the teaching style and learning a space based on the requirement of Industry 4.0 and also like the requirement of the generation. So the teaching style, we need the teaching style for stimulating imagination, creativity, and learning by doing an innovative solution for the context of Industry 4.0. We need also flexibility in learning and teaching that is a leverage of creating an active learning space. So as you know, the pandemic as an urgent need of switching to online courses provide an opportunity for the different educators around the world to test and experiment the different kind of the teaching styles to engage more students in the task activities, class activities. So the other things is teaching sustainability courses, considering the complexity of topics is a little bit different because we have different stakeholders, different multidisciplinary contexts of discourse, and also for each decision in this context, we need to consider it from short-term, mid-term, and also long-term horizon. So it's very important for educators and for teaching this type of course to be flexible, particularly during pandemic. As you know, the cold learning model frequently is used for addressing flexibility in teaching and learning and personalization of teaching. So this work in progress research aims to address the effectiveness of flexibility in teaching based on cold learning model, new model that is called Inventory 4.0 model for designing and personalization of teaching sustainable production in engineering school. Okay, so what is the Kolb experimental learning model? If you don't know that model, it's a very simple model including the 4 stages: concurrent experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experiment. The starting point in a learning experience could be any of these 4 stages. Okay, so it's like a flexible combination of the different learning styles. So if I want to consider some highlighted points from literature review, we have new Kolb learning style, which includes 9 elements. It includes initiating, experiencing, imagining, reflecting, analyzing, thinking, deciding, acting, and balancing. So the combination of different learning styles can build different types of learning and teaching experience. And they classified this in 4 different types of style, including divergent, assimilator, convergent, and accommodator. For example, for divergent style, with a sense of observation and facilitating the imagination, we can stimulate creativity and innovative activities. For accommodator style, we can adapt to new experience for students, and learning by doing and risk-taking could be possible. So we have different types of style that could be matched for the different situation and different objectives of teaching. There are a couple of studies recently published that they work on different the role of flexibility in teaching in online context, in e-learning, and even in during pandemic. So, for example, one study studied the role of flexibility in teaching and evaluation in engineering school. They discussed that considering the diversified background of the students in engineering school, it's necessary to have flexibility in a learning environment. The other study is flexibility in teaching and learning by Deming cycle. They use PDCA cycle and Kolb experimental learning model for this for discussing the flexibility, and they showed that it's an effective approach for flexibility of learners and also for satisfaction of students also. There are a couple of other studies that justify exactly that flexibility and personalization, for example, in teaching. It's very important, and how the flexibility could aid in personalization and customization of teaching approach, and even in the different contexts for e-learning, and also during the pandemic also they discussed this. Okay, this is a kind of different studies recently published with this topic. So if I want to conclude some things from literature review, I would say the new Kolb learning model with 9 learning style is an interesting framework for discussion of the flexibility in learning and teaching environment. And we need a new context of based on the new context of a pandemic, and also the revolution, industrial revolution, that we need to adopt the teaching styles. So we need a kind of flexibility based on the new context from the perspective of the revolutionary technologies, and also from the perspective of the post-pandemic situation. Okay, so a preliminary conceptual framework that I suggested here is based on 4 elements of learning styles of Kolb model, as you can see on the left side. And we have the different the different teaching option as a supermarket for educators, Q&A, teamwork, simulation, case study, invited speakers, games, and so on. And we have the core topics of sustainable development. As you can see, in sustainable development course, we start with the sustainability, with 3 components of sustainability, then life cycle assessment, we need to talk about the environmental management system, and also social life cycle assessment, and also the cost analysis during the life cycle. We need to talk about the eco-design and eco-innovation and responsible supply chain. So the question is how we can build different combination of the teaching style appropriate for each core concept in the context of sustainable development. Okay, so as you can see, we have in a Kolb model initiating a style that refers to the ability to initiate the action to deal with the experiment. So this learning style is appropriate for active learning and accommodation style. So we have the opportunity for learning by doing, try and error that could be matched with this slide. One topic in sustainable development is the responsible supply chain. In this topic, we need to cover comparing the trade-off between changes in product design, monitoring suppliers' environment performance, and also vertical integration, and so on. So simulation and game via teamwork activity would be an effective approach for teaching this topic, because we can create an active and interactive dashboard for students, and they can work in the different terms with this simulation, and they can change, for example, the choice of suppliers, how the choice of suppliers can make the different performance. So with the sense of gamification also, we can create more engagement for students in the different terms for competition also. Another things is the imagining style is preferable in addressing different alternative and perspective in experience. For teaching, the eco-design and eco-innovation, we can use this style. Another teaching style in cold model is analyzing, which is preferable in reflective conceptual learning. So for teaching life cycle analysis and life cycle cost analysis, we can use this approach. Q&A and also virtual whiteboard could be an effective teaching approach in this context. Okay, so for the time, I need to briefly just conclude with some things that, as you can see that you can see we have Industry 4.0 and digitalization that led to novel teaching and learning. We have pandemic that imposed fundamental changes in the future of education system, and we have climate change and social issues that could affect also like the teaching style in future. It's not like just related to the sustainable production courses. It's related to any engineering courses in future that we need to somehow use like more examples related to sustainability. For example, for like chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, how we can integrate sustainability into the examples and into like the course outline. Based on this, like a synthesize, we can see that in future we have the Rubik, like a kind of a Rubik cube of teaching learning style that could be customized based on the topic and also the context for preparation of engineering for job market in future, and also like dealing with uncertainty and disruption in this context. So as a research agenda for future, we can think about the assessing the interaction among Industry 4.0 enable education and pandemic and post-pandemic impacts on teaching and learning style. Also, there are not a lot of the studies that cover the class observation and pilot studies. So we can think about it for the future research for creating some testing and proposed approach as a pilot workshop for the sustainable production course or even for the other courses, and also creating course supermarket with the different teaching options to customize the teaching based on the topic. So thank you so much for your attention. I think if you have any question, I will be happy to answer your question. Thanks.
Thank you. If anyone has any questions for all the presentation, you can put it in the group chat.